Hey everybody, Brayden here, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be playing the King's Indian attack, as always. So let's get into it. Just our normal setup. We are playing against a d5 type of opening, and we're also seeing c6. So we had a game last time where our opponents played something a little similar, except not with the d-pawn here. They played a b7 and c6 structure. But then they overextended with b5, and then we started taking advantage of that diagonal. Here, we might have a different case, where they might not try to weaken this side at all. And if that's the case, what we're going to want to do is we're going to go for a kingside attack. So they're actually going for pretty much a semi-Slav slash London structure, which is extremely effective against these types of lines. So good on them for playing this. Just because there's not really any weaknesses, right? When we look at the structure, we notice they have some holes on the dark squares, but that's about it. They do have a dark square bishop though, so we can't really make anything of it quite yet. I'm looking at e4 here. I also like h3, even c3. I'm going to start with c3. And this generally means I want to play e4. If we see e5, I'll play e4. If not, then I'll probably play e4 anyways. And this kind of makes me want to play queen e1, which is a funny looking move. But I have an idea in mind involving trying to win a piece via e4, e5 with tempo. I want to go queen e1. And if they castle, or if they do that, I think that's also not really correct here. I'm going to switch my strategy up. I was going to go for something a little different, but now I'm happy with this. Do I go d4? I would love to go for a kingside attack, but I gotta make sure it's a reasonable idea here. You don't really want to do that unless the center is locked, because you're weakening your kingside. I like d4 and e4. This just opens up everything and solves any space-related problems I could have had. So e4. And I'm threatening e5 right now, so they're probably going to take. Most players would want to take anyways, just because something like e5 is very serious. We could have also considered f3 here, and then e4. That's also very strong. I'm not sure why I didn't consider that. Generally, I like to make these e4 breaks when I can. And that looks like what we're getting here. Takes. Looks like everything's coming off, and they'll probably end up playing bishop to f5 at the end here. So what's going on in this position where, well, looks like an equal amount of material. It is, of course. And, well, our opponent has not really any weaknesses to speak of. So when you're in a position like this, where all seems lost and there's no hope to gain an advantage, you should start asking what's left on the board. And, well, what are the strongest pieces? Let's start with that. And what are my strongest pieces? Generally, in the King's Indian attack or defense, your fianchettoed bishop is going to be your strongest piece. First off, it prevents any weaknesses on our king side, so it's a good defensive piece. But also, the diagonal, if it ever opens up, it's a very strong piece as well. With this move, queen f3, I'm trying to play bishop to f4. Their best piece is this one right here. And you can make an argument that this bishop on f5 is also extremely good as well. I'm trying to argue that this bishop is better. And if we trade off these two pieces, because this isn't really doing too much for me, then it's going to be my fianchettoed bishop versus their regular light squared bishop, where it's outside of their pawn chain, but maybe they'll start having dark squared weaknesses because of it. It's not really going to be enough here. And we're going to have pretty much an equal position, though I would prefer white. And there's going to be a reason why, and I will highlight that once we see what they do here. They might end up not exchanging. I think this might be a mistake. Then I can start going for moves like h4 and maybe even h5, trying to start creating some play. Okay, so they end up going for the trade. I think we kind of should allow this. And here we are. Okay, so this is the first move where I'm a little curious. I think their idea here should be to play c5. So I'm going to allow them. So queen c1, I should defend the pawn. There's not really a reason not to. I could also go a4 here, but a4 might be met with a5. If I go a3, am I happy there? I'm not sure. That's why I think I want to go queen c1 here. A move like c5 I'm extremely happy to see because it opens up my light squared bishop quite a bit. And I think that would be a problem for them. So they go here, a5. My idea was actually going, or it was going to be a4, a5. So my opponent actually stopped that idea. I like a4 from me now. The thing is, I'm not sure. Something like b3 feels tempting, but we always have to watch out for a4. But then I can play b4. Maybe I start with a3? No. I think I should start with b3. I'm looking at moves like queen b2 and b4. If they ever play c5, I can take it. Okay, and now I think I get b4 in, and I'm pretty happy about the move. The reason why is because they can't play c5, so I'm trying to lock them on the queen side here, and eventually I might even make a pawn sacrifice with b5 and disrupt things over there as well. Alright, so now they're moving over. They might be going for b5 themselves, which would be very strange. That would be a very bad decision. And because of that, I'm looking at moves like rook e1, which are just helping cover the e5 square a little bit more. I don't really care about a3. a3 might actually just become a weakness for them in the future. There we go. Yeah, so this is actually a huge mistake by them. And this is something that I want to capitalize on. Now I think by even playing something like a3, this is going to be a permanent weakness that I can attack forever. And as long as I just make sure they can't really go around to defend it, they're going to have problems. And I'm looking at rook e5 immediately. Rook e5 to c5 immediately attacks the weakness. This looks extremely strong. I don't mind playing something like a3 here. I do want to be a little bit careful about it though. The reason why I kind of want to play it is because then they can't play a3 and fix a weakness on a2 later. I doubt it will come into play, but you never know. So let's play a3 here. f6, and now it's perfect time to swing over to c5 and immediately ask, hey, what's going on here? Because I do have threats in the position, namely c4. So even though the structure looks like really weird, the problem is their structure is significantly worse than ours. And now I think we're just winning a pawn with rook takes c6, and then I can play d5. Or I can play bishop takes c6. I'm not sure if I would want to take the exchange though. The reason why I'm not sure I want to take the exchange is because then I have light square weaknesses, right? It is a significant amount of material. That's one thing to keep in mind about. I could also just take it, and then well, no matter what they do, I take on c6 after. That looks good. Because I don't think they can afford opening the position. So rook takes e5, and then I'll take on c6. And then I have threats of discoveries to actually pick up the rook. Like rook takes f6, for example, is a threat. So I'm expecting rook takes e5. Rook takes c6 will be played. I don't see any other move. Yep, this looks good. I also have f4 as a threat. Because I think rook c5 might actually just pick up the bishop. I could be wrong about that. We'll have to see. I do want to be careful of some like rook e1, some back rank with bishop h3. Because even though I have bishop f1 as a defense, it's not that simple. Because even if I defend it with bishop f1, bishop h3 might actually still end up checkmating me here. So it's always good to be aware of like, okay, like if they go queen e7 or something, I got to be careful that some rook e1 doesn't kill me. Rook takes f6 feels like the most obvious move. If they take it, then I just take on a8 here. I could also go queen d1, trying to get an exchange on the board. I love queen d1. I think I'm going to go with queen d1. This maintains all of my advantages and tries to just exchange things. I have to worry about rook e2, but I don't think it quite works in time. I always have moves like, like what? There's also c4, but I like queen d1 more. Queen d1, there's no rook d5. There's no... Maybe there's bishop d3, but that looks really weird. Bishop d3, and then... c4, f4. I gotta be a little bit quicker. Let's just play queen d1. I need to play a move. I'm spending a little bit too long here. This looks totally reasonable. I still have threats of rook takes f6 or rook c5 in the position. Rook c5 also looks really, really good. Now I should just take. And here I actually like rook c5. Trying to trade. Because if they actually end up trading here, then I get a pass c pawn, and this pawn's going to start running. And it's going to be very uncomfortable to stop. I do need to give myself luft somehow in the next few moves. That would be really nice. But since my rook is on the back rank, that's also something to point out, is I'm really happy about that. Because there's no mate ideas. I like bishop to c6. Bishop to c6 looks like it just picks up this pawn. They do have bishop d3. Maybe I'll just go c6 to be safe. I don't care about rook e2. They can get some activity, but it's just activity. It's not. It's like I don't know how to describe it, but it's not real activity. This is a good move. But I think I might actually have rook to e1 in the position. And the problem is they can't defend everything in time. If they go rook e8 or something, I can take. If they take my bishop, I can just take here. And of course, we'd have to like re-win the position a little bit after this. But objectively, it will be winning. Because they're on the back rank, we have an extra exchange. Yeah, so that's exactly what's going to happen here. Is they want to go in this position, which is objectively winning for us. And the reason why is because, well, when you have a rook versus a bishop in an ending like this, generally one of the best strategies you can come up with is, first off, how do you win the king and pawn ending? And that sounds like obvious, like, okay, yeah, if we get into a king and pawn ending and we know how to win it, we're good. But generally what we can do in these types of situations is give back the exchange for some sort of mass amount of pawns that we can win. So after king c5 here, we have threats of just rook b7 and taking on b5. And here we don't even have to worry about that. We can just take on g7. And we can just start taking pawns and then eventually just take the b5 pawn as well. Let's go rook h7 for a move. Just to see what they do. I assume bishop e2 is going to be played. Yeah. And I'm just going to bring my king in, actually, because they're close to getting mated. Originally, I was looking for mating them. Or not mating them, sorry. Giving back the material a little bit. But it's totally unnecessary here. f5 would have been a good trick, but it wasn't played. f5, if I took it, then I would have lost, because they could play bishop d3 check and skewer. I'm just keeping my rook on the dark squares at this point. Going to pick up this pawn, and I could probably just run my f-pawn at this point. Probably the cleanest way to win this. Got to watch out for tricks like b4. You always have to expect those from your opponents. Sometimes in these online games, they give you some grief. So there's too many pawns to make a stalemate, which is good to know. And I think, yeah, I'm going to start with f5. And then I'll go f6. And I have ideas of some sort of like f7, if I can get it in. Or we just get mate in one, which is great. I feel like we had better ways to maybe convert that. So that'll be really nice to check out. We did hit 1200, and this was our first 1200 that we played against. So those are both momentous occasions. But let's see exactly how we could improve. I was happy with the opening, and I'm not sure exactly what I could have done here. Maybe c3. Yeah, pure c3 wasn't really the best try. Something like c4 or even e4 was better. I was trying to be flexible with c3. The idea here is when I get a position like this and I go queen e1, I'm going for, of course, e4. This isn't really the most, I guess, perfect setup according to the computer. I was happy with it. But the biggest problem, obviously, in these types of positions is will the queen be considered misplaced or not? And since the bishop is not on f5, it kind of is. If the bishop were on f5 right now, we would be winning a piece with e4 and e5. Here, it's not the case. But knight e5 really just helps us. And actually, I was thinking here, so e4 is recommended. So is things like h3. I thought d4 is fine. Bishop d6. And yeah, my intuition is right here. So I played e4, but I was thinking maybe f3 would have been strong. And it looks like it is. The problem here is, well, they have to play bishop h5. If they play bishop f5, we have the same trick of e4 and then e5, winning a piece. But after bishop h5 and we play e4, we have a pretty good position going on here. They're struggling quite a bit. Probably the most natural move would be e5. Of course, this blunders immediately to, I think we can just take, right? Yeah, we can just take. And if there's any takes here, then we can take on d5 and play f4. And this would win us the game immediately. And if they can't do that, then they have to move their bishop, and we can probably get something like e5 in here. Followed by g4, f4, and even f5 coming up, and get our kingside attack going. So I wish I paused a little bit longer here instead of just playing e4, which is going to kind of make things a little bit harder to open up. But that's okay, it happens. Here, yeah, pretty equal-ish looking position. I was happy. Again, I assessed this as I would rather be white, mainly because of our light squared bishop, and I'm happy that that's true. And again, so there was another thing that I'm happy to be right about, and that's which bishop is better. Sometimes the bishop on f5 can be better than the one on d6, because the one on f5 is pretty active and can make a claim that, well, it's on good squares, despite being on the same color pawns as itself. And the bishop on d6 sometimes could just be looking at granite. But luckily, I was right with bishop f4 being the right choice here, because after this exchange, when we do look at what's remaining on the board, we can try to claim a slight advantage because our bishop could be opened up at some point, and it actually ends up being opened up in the game, which is something that happens under like about, I'd say 1400, is players are much more likely to open up your own pieces, and that's something that you should definitely take into account, because if you can open up your own pieces, or you can have your opponents open them up for you, that's good, because that will give you an advantage. So queen b6, I wasn't sure if queen c1 was right. I was thinking of b3 or queen d2. Queen d2 I wasn't as sure about, because maybe they play something like rook d8 and then c5 anyways. So I wasn't really too happy about that. I thought queen c1 was an interesting try. A5, and I was thinking of a4 here, but I immediately, like, well, it was my instinct, but I didn't play it, and that's because it puts a pawn on a light square where it actually could be attacked in the future. And I'm not sure if we're happy about that. After something like rook fd8, let's just say rook e1. I'm not sure if they'd want to play some sort of c5, but we can see that all of a sudden things might be a little bit softer over here. b2 is harder to defend. We don't have b3 as an option. Whereas in the game when I play b3, I thought this was a little bit more challenging, because if they play a4, we can try b4. And this kind of locks the structure on this side to light squares. And when we have light squares that we could potentially attack at some point, then maybe we could make something of it. One of their best strategies here is to play bishop d3, followed by bishop c4 to d5. That's hard to see for people that wouldn't be experienced with realizing that this bishop is much more powerful than this one. But after queen c7, rook e1, and b5, the evaluation naturally should just jump up quite a bit. And the reason why is because they have a target on c6, and we have nothing that they can target themselves. So rook e5, rook e8, and yeah, the recommendation here was c4. I remember mentioning this in the game. I was a little bit hesitant to play something like this, just because, well, it does weaken d4 and b4 if they ever take. Of course, this is totally winning after this, because, well, rook c5, queen takes c4, we can add way too much pressure onto c6. I thought I'd play it a little different and play a3 first, and I was planning c4 here, but f6 was played, rook c5, and e5, so I wasn't really in time to ever play c4. So that's kind of a key thing to mention. And bishop takes c6 is best, queen a7 and taking on e8. Again, I wasn't too sure about this, mainly because it weakens our light squares. And in a classical game or in a real game that's against someone about even rated to me, like 2000, 2100, I'd probably go for it. But here I wanted to kind of stick to some of those principles of not really giving our opponents anything if we can do that. So that's why I took, and then took on c6. And after queen d7, yeah, I was considering rook takes f6, which is the second best move, which is not surprising at all. c4 is best, which I think I mentioned at some point. But queen d1 was definitely not the right call. I was just getting low on time, so I wanted to make a move. But yeah, looking at the position, it just doesn't really make too much sense, because we do have the weakness on a3 that they could target, and this could be a problem in the future. That was something I was slightly worried about, but yeah, something like c4 is just much, much more natural, where if they ever take, then of course we can take, and well, just a funny blunder here would be something like bishop e6, because we can take it with the rook, open up our bishop, and win their rook in the corner. So that'd be a nice way to win the game. So yeah, c4 was better than queen d1, which yeah, I kind of botched that there. Rook c5 I was actually happy with, despite the eval not being so great. And the reason why actually kind of happy with it is just because if they took, which they ended up doing, I think this just gives us probably close to a winning position now. Because after some sort of c6, uh, we might even get our pawn to c7. I doubt we'd push it that far because we don't want it to be lost or anything, but we can start getting activity of our own at some point here. Definitely one of the weaker endgames I've played in this series so far, though. So bishop e4 was a mistake because of rook e1, which is good. We get this position. And just one thing to mention here. So if they don't give up that pawn and then they keep shuffling, I don't know if we had... Oh, I think we had a tactic here with rook c8. My bad. Let's just ignore that. Playing a little too quickly there. But let's pretend that they didn't actually blunder anything there. And they just tried to be as solid as possible. We can just take on c4 at this point. We just return the material to win a pawn. And, well, now this is a completely winning king and pawn ending, as we can see. We'll win this pawn as well. 2 pawns on the outside. We could sacrifice both of them to win these guys and win the game with the 3 pawns on the king side there. So that's just something to mention. But yeah, really, really sloppy play by me this time around, especially missing rook c8, which is very, very silly. And not going for c4 in retrospect. c4 was much more active and much more necessary in the position. Of course, we did end up winning, which is really important and nice. But yeah, we could have done a lot better here. And again, f5 was a nice trap because king takes on f5 would be a huge mistake. Supposedly, we're actually still okay after bishop d3, king f6 takes, because I think we have h3 and g4. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something better. Oh, king g5, and they can't defend the pawn. So we get 3 pawns on this side of the board. White is slightly better. I would not risk it in this type of position because sometimes you have to be really accurate to not lose the game, since they do have 2 pawns on the other side of the board, which they can defend with their bishop. And I think that'll cover it. Just one extra note is, hey, take your time. 10-minute games can be good, where you can play your same opening a bunch of times in quick succession. You can get a lot of experience in it, and I definitely played a lot of 10-minute games myself, but this kind of highlights the problem with 10-minute games is you only have 10 minutes to think, and well, I don't want the commentary to be extremely boring if, you know, they're like 40-minute, 50-minute games, so I am sticking to 10-minute because we can discuss these ideas within reason in that time frame. But if you want to make sure you're not also falling for these types of things, or if you're wanting to be more accurate, yeah, play longer time controls. It's also better for your chess, especially if you're trying to come up with these ideas. These are things that I've learned from playing longer games myself. Generally, I haven't learned all these ideas of principles of 2 weaknesses, or trying to take advantage of a piece being opened up. Those are all learned by a lot of calculation, a lot of analysis, and usually that happens when you play those long games. So that's just kind of a small rant there, and maybe an excuse for missing rook c8 and not playing c4 sooner. But that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.